I'm using this small sample to demonstrate the cable pattern that's being used as one of the cable patterns in the top-down garment design. In this demonstration I'm going to work the cables with a cable needle. So when you come to working cables with a cable needle, there's a variety of cable needle styles that you can use. The traditional version would be a straight needle, and then you have these slightly different, what they call cranked needles, and then this needle, which I call a U shape, but some people call a J shape, which is produced by a company called Clover. And this is the version of the cable needle that I prefer, so this is the one I'm going to be using. As you can see, they come in different thicknesses, and you need to select, usually in a pack you'll get 2 or 3, and you need to select the one that's either the same needle size or smaller than the main needle you're using. So let me move those out of the way. Also, before we start, I'm just briefly going to bring across the chart. So this is the chart I'm working from. I'm just going to remove that. I'm using it on a magnetic board, and with all charts you get a key, so it has a key to explain what all these different symbols mean. This is being knitted flat, so I've got numbers on either side of the chart, and unusually this chart starts with a wrong side row, so row 1 is on the right hand side and row 2 is on the left hand side. You would normally follow a chart by working away from the number, so row 1 being a wrong side row is read from left to right, and row 2, which is a right side row, is read from right to left. It's always helpful when you're working from charts, at least I find it helpful, to have either, as I was showing before, a ruler, and I always place my ruler just above the row I'm about to work, so that I can look at my knitting and it should look similar to the chart. So here's my little row of cables up here, and this is the cable panel in the centre, and I've got my cables twisting in the same direction as the prominent diagonal in the chart. Alternatively, if you don't have a magnetic board, you can use something like a post-it note. So again, I would place the post-it note on the line just above where I'm knitting, so that my eye doesn't get drawn up and confused with what's above. So I'm now going to knit this row, but I'm going to move the chart out of the way now. So at the moment I've just got a little cable cross in the centre here, and this particular style of cable is called Bavarian Twisted Stitch. So all these knit stitches are worked through the back loop, as you've been doing with the little cable that's used in the raglan section of the garment. So I knit through the back of the knit stitch, purl 1, knit through the back, purl 1, purl again, and then this is the little cable. So if you want to be crossing cables with a cable needle, in this case the second stitch has to come in front of the first stitch, so I have to take the first stitch off the needle onto my cable needle, and this time it needs to hang at the back of the knitting so that the second stitch can cross in front of it. So I've taken the stitch off the cable needle, knit through the back of the second stitch, and then bring the cable needle up again. At this point you've got a choice. You can either slip the stitch back to the left needle, or just work the stitch off the other end of the cable needle. It's whatever you feel comfortable with. For many years I always used to slip the stitches back onto my left needle and then work them, but you can work them off the cable needle. So if I complete this row, and then I need to show you, this is being worked flat, so what we do have to do is still work the twisted stitches correctly on wrong side rows. So on this wrong side row, there are no cables or no cables on, it is cabling, so there's no cables on wrong side rows, but we still have to work these twisted stitches so that they remain as twisted stitches as before. So we have to do the purl through the back loop, one, purl through the back loop, let's just get some more yarn up. So on the wrong side rows in the cable panel, all the purl stitches have to be worked through the back loop. That's the end of the cable panel. I've just got a little bit of stocking stitch either side. So the next row of the chart, I'll briefly bring it across again, hopefully you can see all right. The next row of the chart, so I've just worked the wrong side row there, row 11. I'm now going to work the first row where stitches start to move in different directions. So this column of knit stitches, the knit stitch is going to move over the purl stitch. This twisted cable up here, again the knit stitch is going to cross over this purl stitch, and this knit stitch over this purl, this knit over this purl. So we're now starting to move the stitches around a bit more. So the first twisted stitch is still a straight column, and then we do the purl stitch, and now this next stitch is going to be moving towards the middle. This knit stitch is going to pass over this purl stitch, so that when we've worked the cable we're going to be purling and then knitting. So I need to leave my yarn at the front here because the next stitch to be actually worked will be a purl stitch. I can use my cable needle to take the knit stitch off of the left needle, and I need to hold it at the front so that it can cross in front of this purl stitch. I then purl that stitch, and then, as I say, I can replace the knit stitch if you find that easier, and knit through the back loop, because we've still got to work our knit through the back loop. Now the next little travelling stitch or cable is this knit stitch passing in front of this purl stitch. I have to take the purl stitch off before I can work the knit stitch, but I'm going to work a knit as the next stitch, so the yarn stays at the back. Take the purl stitch off and hold it at the back. So that the next stitch I work is a knit stitch. Knit one through the back loop, and it crosses in front of this purl stitch. So again, I can slip the purl stitch back onto my left needle. I now can bring my yarn forward, purl one. And again, this knit stitch is going to cross in front of this purl stitch. So we take the stitch off, hold it at the front, purl one, and if I'm working it off the cable needle, I just knit through the back loop off the cable needle. And then again, this next knit stitch needs to cross in front of the purl stitch, so this time the purl comes off first. So I slip the purl stitch off, hold it at the back, knit one, bring up my cable needle, and I can again purl off the cable needle. Purl off the cable needle, and then finish the rest of the panel as the stitches are, because there's no more cable crosses on this particular row. I would now work the wrong side row, so I'd be reading my chart from left to right this time, and again with it on this side I would be knitting the stitches and purling through the back loop, all of the purl stitches in the panel. So you just need to be looking at your chart and working out the first stitch. You always have to take the first stitch of any pair off onto your cable needle, and you just have to work out whether it's the stitch that crosses in front or behind as to where you place your cable needle. That's working the cable crosses with a cable needle.